Welcome to the Photos of History channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this one. The Auxiliary Territorial Service, ATS, was the women's branch of the British Army during World War II. An ATS spotter would be responsible for identifying and tracking enemy aircraft, often working alongside anti-aircraft gun crews. The 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun was a key piece of artillery used by British forces to defend against aerial attacks. A crew from the 16th 5th Lancers 6th Armored Division cleaned the gun barrel of their Crusader tank at El Arousa in Tunisia. The Crusader tank was a crucial British cruiser tank used extensively in the Western Desert Campaign. By 1943 in Tunisia, these tanks were involved in the final stages of the North African campaign against Axis forces. Nurses and convalescent aircrew at Princess Mary's Royal Air Force Hospital at Halton in Buckinghamshire. In 1943, this hospital provided care for aircrew members who were wounded or suffered from illnesses and needed recovery time away from the front lines. The scene featuring nurses and convalescent aircrew highlights the vital role of medical personnel in supporting the war effort. The nurses at Halton were responsible not only for providing medical treatment, but also for offering comfort and care to airmen recovering from their injuries and the psychological toll of combat. Private Alfred Campen of the 6th Battalion, Durham Light Infantry, participated in battle training in Britain in 1944, during the final stages of preparation for the Allied invasion of Western Europe. The Durham Light Infantry was a regiment of the British Army with a long and distinguished history, and the 6th Battalion was a territorial army unit that played a significant role in World War II. An air raid precautions warden inspecting damaged buildings in Holborn, London, in 1941, reflects the everyday bravery and resilience of civilians during the Blitz in World War II. The Air Raid Precautions was a civil defense organization in the United Kingdom established to protect civilians from the dangers of air raids, especially during the intense bombing campaigns carried out by the German Luftwaffe against British cities. In 1944, British paratroopers preparing for a practice jump from an RAF Dakota at Down Ampney in Wiltshire were part of the elite airborne forces training for operations in World War II. The Dakota, also known as the Douglas C-47 Skytrain in the United States, was a widely used military transport aircraft, essential for paratrooper drops and supply missions. Field Marshal Sir Bernard Montgomery explains Allied strategy to King George VI in his command caravan in Holland. In 1944, Field Marshal Sir Bernard Montgomery, one of Britain's most prominent military leaders during World War II, was involved in planning and executing key Allied operations in Northwest Europe. General Dwight D. Eisenhower and his senior commanders at Supreme Allied Headquarters in London, 1944. The senior commanders under Eisenhower included key figures such as General Bernard Montgomery, commander of the British 21st Army Group, General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. First Army, Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, who was in charge of naval operations, Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder, Eisenhower's deputy, and Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Lee Mallory, who commanded the Allied Expeditionary Air Forces. Lancaster bombers nearing completion in Avro's assembly plant at Woodford near Manchester. Niton for Titre. The Avro Lancaster was a British heavy bomber, renowned for its capacity, range, and effectiveness, becoming the mainstay of the Royal Air Force's Bomber Command during the war. Lieutenant Vernon R. Richards of the 361st Fighter Group flies his P-51D Mustang, nicknamed Tika-4, during a bomber escort mission. Niton Fire. The P-51 Mustang was an American long-range, single-seat fighter aircraft that played a crucial role in achieving air superiority for the Allies during World War II. These bomber escort missions were critical, as the bombers were often targeted by German fighters. The P-51 Mustang, with its exceptional speed, agility, and range, was ideally suited for these missions. A 5.5-inch gun crew from the 75th Shropshire Yeomanry Medium Regiment Royal Artillery, in action in Italy, 1943s. The 75th Medium Regiment, which was part of the Royal Artillery, played a crucial role in providing artillery support for British and Commonwealth forces during this campaign. British soldiers admire the caryatids on the Acropolis while sightseeing in Athens. The caryatids are iconic sculptural columns in the Erechtheion, a temple on the Acropolis, which date back to the 5th century BC. They are celebrated for their elegance and historical significance, representing the classical art and architecture of ancient Greece. The presence of British soldiers in Athens in 1944 would likely be related to the broader Allied efforts in the region, including the liberation of Greece from Axis forces. The RAF's top-scoring fighter pilot, Wing Commander James Johnny Johnson with his Spitfire and pet Labrador Sally in Normandy, Nitten Furtifier. Dutch civilians dance in the streets after the liberation of Eindhoven by Allied forces. Eindhoven was liberated on September 18, 1944, during Operation Market Garden, a major Allied operation aimed at securing key bridges and advancing into the Netherlands. The liberation of Eindhoven marked a significant and emotional victory for both the Allied forces and the Dutch people. After years of German occupation, the arrival of Allied troops was met with immense relief and celebration. The sight of civilians dancing in the streets captured the euphoria and gratitude of a population that had endured the hardships of occupation. A French sailor and 2 U.S. Army soldiers looking at the Eiffel Tower after the liberation of Paris. Paris was liberated from German occupation on August 25, 1944, during the final stages of World War II, as part of the larger Allied campaign to reclaim European cities and territories from Axis control. The liberation of Paris was a significant event, not only for the French people, but also for the Allied forces. The city had been under German occupation since 1940, and its liberation marked a pivotal moment in the Allied advance through Western Europe. A German soldier fires a backpack flamethrower across a field of tall grass in the Soviet Union. Flamethrowers were employed to clear obstacles, bunkers, and enemy positions, and their effectiveness in creating terror and destruction made them a feared weapon. 2 prisoners of the Buchenwald concentration camp, 1945s. Buchenwald, located near Weimar, Germany, was one of the largest and most notorious Nazi concentration camps. It housed tens of thousands of prisoners, including Jews, political prisoners, Romani people, homosexuals, and other groups targeted by the Nazis. A lathe operator forges parts for transport planes at the Consolidated Aircraft Corporation plant in Fort Worth, Texas. The lathe operator's role was crucial in manufacturing precision parts and components for these transport planes, ensuring that the aircraft met the rigorous standards required for combat and transport missions. A former prisoner holds a human bone from a large pile of other bones from the Buchenwald concentration camp's crematory. 1945s. The crematory at Buchenwald, like those in other concentration camps, was used to dispose of the bodies of victims who had died from starvation, disease, forced labor, and execution. The celebration of the liberation of France in 1944 was a profound and joyous occasion, marking the end of years of German occupation during World War II. Following the Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, and the subsequent advances by Allied forces, the liberation of major French cities, including Paris on August 25, 1944, was met with widespread celebrations. The Yalta Conference, held from February 4 to 11, 1945, was a pivotal meeting during World War II between 3 of the Allied leaders: British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. The conference took place in Yalta, Crimea, which was then part of the Soviet Union. The Yalta Conference was a landmark moment in shaping the post-war order and establishing the terms for Allied cooperation and the reconstruction of Europe. However, the agreements made at Yalta would later become a source of contention, particularly regarding Soviet influence in Eastern Europe, leading to the onset of the Cold War. The preparation of United States troops for D-Day, June 6, 1944, was a monumental effort involving meticulous planning and extensive coordination. D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy, was one of the largest amphibious military assaults in history and marked a crucial turning point in World War II. The success of the D-Day landings was the result of careful planning, coordination, and the bravery and determination of the Allied troops. United States troops in Cologne. In 1945, U.S. troops in Cologne, Germany, were part of the broader Allied push into the heart of Nazi Germany during the final stages of World War II. The capture of Cologne was a significant milestone in the Allied campaign to liberate Western Europe. United States Air Force over Germany. In 1945, United States Air Force operations over Germany were a crucial component of the Allied strategy to defeat Nazi Germany and bring World War II to a close. The air campaign played a significant role in weakening German military capabilities, disrupting industrial production, and supporting ground operations. Actress Marlene Dietrich sits on a piano while troops gather around. Italy, 1945s. Marlene Dietrich was known for her efforts to boost the morale of Allied soldiers during the war. In this image, she is elegantly perched on a piano, wearing a military-style uniform, while the soldiers gather around her, captivated by her presence. Her performances were a blend of music, humor, and charm, and this photograph reflects her dedication to supporting the troops. A sailor from the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Bennington inscribes a bomb for Gale, in memory of a departed shipmate. Pacific, 1945s. Troops and projectiles line the deck of the battleship USS New Mexico. Invasion of Guam, 1944s. The USS New Mexico, a battleship of the New Mexico class, played a crucial role in providing naval gunfire support during amphibious assaults, including the invasion of Guam. The soldiers on deck would have been preparing for their part in the invasion, contributing to the Allied efforts to recapture Guam from Japanese forces. American tank crew servicemen at Fort Knox, 1942. In 1942, as the United States prepared for extensive involvement in the war, soldiers at Fort Knox were trained in operating and maintaining tanks, armored vehicles, and other essential equipment used in armored warfare. This description refers to the historic moment on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, where the Japanese formally surrendered to the Allied forces, effectively ending World War II. An American soldier trains at Fort Knox, Niton Fertitta. Fort Knox, Kentucky was the primary training center for the U.S. Army's armored forces, where soldiers were taught how to operate and maintain tanks and other armored vehicles. The German heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper abandoned in dry dock at Kiel, Germany. By May 1945, the war in Europe was drawing to a close, and the German military, including its naval forces, was in a state of collapse. The Admiral Hipper had been heavily damaged from previous engagements and air attacks and was eventually scuttled by its crew to prevent it from falling into Allied hands. Auxiliary Territorial Service plotters at work at Coastal Artillery Headquarters in Dover. The Auxiliary Territorial Service was the women's branch of the British Army during World War II, and its members served in various roles, including clerks, drivers, radar operators, and plotters. December 1942s. Children aboard a Sherman tank of the 3rd County of London Yeomanry, in Sicily, August 1943. Local workers helping RAF fitters change the engine of a Lockheed Hudson at Yundum in the Gambia. During World War II, Yundum served as a strategic airfield for the Allies in West Africa, crucial for ferrying aircraft, supplies, and personnel between the United States and North Africa. April 1943. Women producing bullets and cannon shells in an underground munitions factory on the Wirral, Merseyside. The Wirral, a peninsula in Merseyside, England, was home to several such factories. The use of underground facilities was a strategic measure to protect the factories from air raids and to ensure continuous production, despite the threat of bombing. 1945s.